Hello, everybody. Welcome to this space. Thank you so much for being here. And today we have a very special guest. We have Chloe D'Souza, and she's a sexuality, sex, love, and relationship coach as well. She's also an expert in, oh my God, it's the five dances. Is am I
Five
pronouncing?
rhythm dance, yeah. Five
Yeah,
rhythm ecstatic dance. Yeah.
and static dance. And it's so cool that we're going to have a conversation about, we're going to be talking about patriarchy, which, it's one of my favorite topics ever, dismantling patriarchy. We're going to be talking about embodiment and about our pleasure and the connection that our pleasure has to our power as well. So thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Yeah. I'm really happy to be here. It's great to meet you, Sasha.
Yeah. We were just having such a beautiful warm-up conversation, and then we were like, okay, we just need to start recording. We are,
We should have started recording 10 minutes ago, but
yeah.
let's do it now.
Beautiful. So first of all, I would really love to know what static dance and five rhythms is, because I don't know. I of course do Kundalini dance. I do some non-linear dancing practices, but I am so curious about what it is like to teach this methodology.
Okay, so the five rhythms were started by a dear friend who's now dead. She's a New Yorker called Gabrielle Roth. And she noticed when watching people dance that they go through five different rhythms on the whole. So that's flowing, staccato, chaos, lyrical, and stillness. Um, which is really beautiful because flowing, you're really finding yourself. Staccato, you're starting to express yourself more out breath. Chaos, you release into the chaos of everything. It's a bit like climax, no mind. Lyrical is more like the patterns you find your body moving with that come from a much more soul place, if that's what you want to call it, or the way nature repeats itself in patterns. And stillness is really the place you get to having danced all of those things, and there's an emptiness to your movement, which it could be slow, it could be fast, but there's an emptiness to you. So it's this delicious space that you end up in, which it's not dissimilar to lots of other things that we do, like if, for example, making love, getting into that kind of movement prayer that is possible. But also there's a reclamation of the body. If you do this dance so many times, you get to know yourself very, very well. You get more familiar with the different emotions that you have. So I'm also a heartbeat five rhythms trained dancer, facilitator. So also you get to know your sadness, your grief, you get to know your anger, you get to know your sexuality, you get to know your fear, you get to know your love. So it's an incredible way to really open up all these places within yourself, and also take ownership of your heart, of your body, of the way you want to move through the world. So I loved it for so many reasons.
Sounds so amazing and so powerful.
Mm.
There's such power to dancing, and I love this. mm, The oh my God, the five elements make a lot of sense to me, and you just made me think of this experience I had once when I was processing a very intense emotion through dance. Like, I allowed myself to go through what I called in that moment just a dance of the world, just connecting to the sound of the world, which was inspired on a book I read by Paulo Coelho many years ago. But I remember that I was doing this dance, and I was grieving. I was in a very difficult moment of my life, and after I danced and I just fell back into my power, into all this fire that just started arising through my body. I remember going out feeling totally different, feeling beautiful, powerful, connected to my sensuality, to my body. And I remember this little child that approached me because I had to cross a park. And this child approached me and said, "Are you a queen?" Because I was like, "Oh, actually."
Actually, yes.
So I wanted to share that because that was just a very personal, improvised, following my own magic experience. But I'm sure that you have seen so many powerful transformations with this practice. How does it feel like? What happens in a practice? Is that with a group? Is that individual? Did you do that with coaching? How does it look like?
Yeah, it's in a group. So I'm a sort of an avid music lover. So I would DJ as well as facilitate the group. And I used to run, and it's still running actually because I handed the group on a full moon dance for women in London, which was five rhythms based. That was incredible. So it was people of all sexualities, but for the heterosexual women, dancing without the presence of men, you take away the male gaze, and you start to move differently because you're moving for yourself. Now
Yeah.
that in itself was deep. Because the sense of your own queen comes through, or whatever it is that you would censor. I mean, you have an American phrase, ugly crying, which I don't understand at all, because for me the beauty of tears, I know it's a mainstream word, a phrase, but the beauty of watching someone break like that, and what you see like clearing from their system is absolutely incredible. That this sweet release, it's like they're loving themselves, right? And I think really the tangible experience of finding in my own body emotions that were stored from my past. So Gabrielle said to me one day, she said, "Oh, how many tears are you going to cry, Chloe?" But it was all in my hands, and eventually my hands stopped crying, and now they do other things for me and with me. But so you very much watch people store getting defrosted, the emotions stored in the body, and expressing them, freeing them, and then they move into different spaces. There's more room for them. You're no longer trapped with your past actually in your body. There's more room for you now, and then life becomes a very creative place.
I love that. And I can see the connection of this
Mm.
with sexuality work because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's all living in our bodies. And
Yeah.
I can see how it makes so much sense that you do both. But then there's also something that you mentioned that I was like, yeah, that is important. The male gaze of why we do the things that we do, and the importance of this dancing by ourselves, and the magic that happens when we are connecting with another group of women without the male gaze. And that takes me to this topic that we wanted to discuss, which is patriarchy, dismantling patriarchy. So it's fascinating. I feel like there's so much power in what happens when women get together to heal, and that is, oh my gosh. I remember, I know that you and I took a similar the same training in different years. Um, but that was one of the experiences I had with the retreat of that training. Seeing many women dancing together, feeling their sexuality together, and there were no men around. So it was, sex was for us, not for somebody else to witness or to enjoy. And I feel like that's the great power of sexual healing and sexuality work. So
Mm.
I'm curious, have you noticed, how did you experience this when it comes to the realm of sexuality?
In terms of watching women have a relationship with their own
Sex,
sexuality.
yeah.
Well, it's, I mean, I do laugh because, I talk about sex a lot. I like talking about sex. But once you get in the room with a client, it's almost inevitably a journey home. So I could say, I can start off anywhere, but inevitably it seems to lead to this place of the journey home. And so often the women say to me, I want a stronger relationship with myself. And often they might say, oh well, my partner and me, we have this problem, but actually when you get round to what they really desire, or they're called desire, it's like, oh, I'd like a stronger relationship with myself.
Mm.
So this importance of how much the world impacts bodies, and here we're talking about the female body and patriarchy. So for me, I had danced for 20 years on dance floors. That's a lot of dance. And yet when I started to add in the sexual practices and my own pleasure practices, and within the training that we both did, I still had a sense of, and this for me is so key to portions of my work, that somehow society owned my body,
Mhm.
and that made me angry.
Yes.
um, and so this is what I mean by undoing the patriarchy. And I'm not blaming, I'm not saying, I'm not blaming men. I'm saying we have work to do inside of ourselves to take
Mhm.
ownership of ourselves.
Yeah.
And the reason why I feel highly motivated in my work is because I think right now on the planet we need to step into our leadership. As this is what's needed on the planet right now. So for women to take ownership of their bodies, ownership of their sexualities, use that to fuel their lives in positive ways. Like, this is the bigger picture of feral grace. This is the work that you and I are doing. Um, so, in terms of body ownership, the importance of not being owned by society and owning yourself and finding out what yourself wants to do with your life is everything.
I love how you put it because there's so much truth in that. I have found that even myself, when I started looking for this work, and the people that approach me, they don't know that they are looking for themselves. They think that they are looking for more pleasure with their partner, or to have better connections with their lovers, or to be more sexy, or more, like, we don't really know what we don't know. And
Mm.
then when we just start reaching to that point, it happens the way you just described. We inevitably start the journey home. I love how you put it, because that has been so true for me and for the people that I have worked with as well.
Yeah. And it's the best job in the world to watch people do that for themselves. Yeah.
And it's fascinating because it's just like you mentioned, it's like society owes our body and our pleasure and our sexuality. Like, specifically women, because I don't think that this is a problem in that specific problem. They have many problems due to patriarchy as well. Patriarchy screws everybody over.
Mm.
But I think that the specific problem of feeling like our bodies belong, and our sexuality belong to everybody else but us,
Mm.
is something that is very, very specific of the female body, or maybe also of the non-binary bodies, but not of the masculine bodies. So, have you seen that as well? Have you noticed that as well?
Yeah, yeah. I think women have a very specific experience, and we were talking just before the call actually on finding the languaging for that. I was shocked because, okay, so it might have been ego, but I thought I was kind of in ownership of myself, right? And then still in some of the depth of practices that I practiced and went through, it shocked me. That's education going on in society from a very young age. You know, I'd like to touch on this point some of the like archetypes and stories that were fed also, which feeds into women not feeling in ownership of their own sexuality. You only need to look specifically, say, within the UK at some of the fairy stories that all young girls used to read. I think it's changing now. Sleeping Beauty, she gets kissed without consent, right? They're all geared around princes saving them, and there became a time in my adult life, and I talk about this a lot with clients because it's a relief to them, that there is no prince to save you. It doesn't mean you can't have a really amazing conscious relationship with another person, because you can. But in terms of my body being somehow neutralized and waiting for somebody else to do something for me, there's the story. And that went into my psyche at a young age, and the children around me of the last 20 years in the UK, and suddenly it's like, that doesn't feel right, particularly when I think also sex education is a real problem, because you don't have like feminist or pro female sexuality education. So even if the prince were to save you, unless he's had a really good experience with a female body and would know, like, oh, maybe I'd like one of the 5 different orgasms that I'd like today, most guys aren't also educated, because we've lost those systems. So even if they are in ownership of the female body, there's not enough education to even start to open the treasure that we are.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I totally. I have so many stories about that. The one of the most impactful things that I have heard a person saying, and I heard it again recently in a coffee shop, but the first time I heard it was from a client, was when they refer to their bodies as produce for male consumption. Like like it was common for them in their families to refer to women as producto para caballero, produce for male consumption. So, and the sad thing is that it's not that phrase, but the reality that so many women around the world experience that is reflected by that phrase. So I feel like it goes back to how our pleasure has been seen as something we give to somebody, like if a man was entitled to use a woman's body to have pleasure from it, and then we are waiting for that person, like hopefully if he's a very good person and a good lover, and please make him pay back by giving me pleasure as well. And then and it's like both concepts are very mistaken. Both the concept of our pleasure being there for the taking, and somebody using it, and the concept of a man giving us pleasure, which sometimes happens, yes, but the idea is, what if we were the source of our own pleasure? And I find that that is the thing that sexuality work empowers so beautifully. It teaches us how to connect to that source of pleasure and make it our own power source, so that we are self autonomous and don't need to go and look for others to plug in to try to get that energy from.
Yeah, I love you. Yeah. And so when I talk about body ownership as well, and some of the phrases I use, it's like body ownership is hot, you know. Like if you come across a person who's in body ownership and has plugged into that source, just like you are talking about, there's nothing selfish about it, because you get to interact with somebody who's plugged into the source. I mean, the levels of pleasure available to everybody then in that space, is it levels up, as opposed to this, there's somehow this, and you'll hear women talk about guilt, or am I being selfish, there's so much conditioning in terms of service. But when we serve the pleasure to ourselves first, you have this relationship with yourself, which means you have so much more to share with everybody around you. And so I love that knock-on effect because actually there's more of you rather than less of you if you plug into that source.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that. There's more of you. And that has been such a powerful realization. It's like going back to dancing, like how different it is to dance for yourself. You're plugging into layers and layers and layers of healing when you dance for yourself,
Mm.
which is different from dancing for somebody else, or even worse, letting somebody else dance you, which is like something that happens a lot in Latin American dancing styles. Like there's this idea of the man guiding you, and it's difficult sometimes. If he's a good dancer, it can be beautiful, but if he's not a good dancer, it can just be very hectic.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's so similar to sexuality. It's just the same story as sexuality.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I was reading the other day about the phrase, like our, like in terms of there's so much patriarchy in our languaging as well. I gave her an orgasm. No one's going to
Oh,
give me an orgasm. I might access an orgasm for myself if I chose to have one in that moment. I
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
and
Not to
and it
mention the
and it's
violence.
beautiful. I find so many men awake to just how incredible female bodies are, and this map of orgasmic treasure trove that they are, and how they love to play in that field, in that playground. And this is a different experience. This is an entirely different attitude, which I'm loving, that I do come in contact with lots of people like that actually it's like, oh my gosh. But I think it might be worth mentioning in terms of like the concepts of, like, in terms of undoing the patriarchy, we also have to move from junior masculinity into senior masculinity, and that has to happen inside of oneself, inside of me as a female, as well as with the men that I interact with. um, and that's a really beautiful thing, and we need to grow a culture. And some days I'm like, oh fuck, I'm a sex love relationship coach. It's not an easy role to say, oh, I'm here to help these cultures grow up a little bit into some senior and masculine and female around sexuality, so that we can all play in the way that can have this expanded view of sex. For me, I've spent a lot of time doing various different spiritual practices, and for me, like, nature is perfect. Every time you climax, you are having an experience of no mind. So the importance of us all growing up into sort of this senior masculine and femininity to enjoy sexuality. You have a very, very deep spiritual experience available to you, or just a really incredibly vulnerable, intimate depth of heart connection, plus like the sacredness of two bodies coming together. I mean, I couldn't imagine anything better to do.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned the language. I gave her an orgasm. It's such an important part because there are so many patriarchal mistaken ideas and hurtful, because they are actually hurtful ideas about sexuality. Oh, I froze. Uh,
You're still with me here.
yeah, okay. From my side, it seems like I froze, but can you still hear me?
I can still see you. Yeah.
Okay, so there. Okay, so there are so many hurtful ideas about sexuality that we keep repeating, and I feel like it's such an important issue to overcome. From the I gave her an orgasm to the taking a woman. Like, I don't know if the same expression exists in English, but in Spanish it's like taking a woman, as if it was something they could grab and use, like, or sex as violence, like breaking somebody and breaking her ass, things that are actually violent, and that people repeat when they are speaking about sexuality. So I feel like it's such an important healing that needs to take place in order, and it starts with the language, how we refer to sexuality, to our body parts, to our partners, and to the act itself, so that it's healing and not hurtful.
Yeah, yeah. I feel really sad. I feel sad about the violence of language and the female body, and I think that's a very specific thing, and there's a very deep conversation to be had about war and uses of sexuality in war that we could touch on another time because it would need a trigger warning. But yeah, in terms of women starting to own their bodies more, so that definitely the next generations, consents, like, just like, well, of course, but I don't know about you, but I didn't grow up being taught what consent was,
Yeah.
you know and so, within the practices that we would practice, uh, encourage our clients to practice, and with ourselves, you even have consent with your own body, and that's a beautiful place to start. So this ownership of oneself, and starting with your own relationship with yourself, and women being given permission to go and get to know themselves, you know is amazing, and asking consent with their own bodies. What would you like today?
Mhm.
Whatever word you have for your own body part, what would she like today? Do you want this, or do you want that? And practicing that high level of consent, so that if you choose to share yourself with somebody, then also you're going to expect a consensual approach to your body, and it's more likely to happen because you have an expectation in your nervous system that you have set up yourself. So that's like the depth of the body ownership that we're talking about, and how
Okay.
that interplays with women in their environment.
Hmm. I love that. And it also makes a lot of sense to me how we can go from connecting to our sexuality to dismantling patriarchy. Like how the first step is actually connecting to our sexuality, the power that it has, and how unexpected that is as a result. Right? Like you were mentioning that you are working with different genders, that you are not only limited to working with women, and it's clear to me how sexuality work heals women or our connection to our own body.
Yeah.
But how have you noticed that men change their relation to women as they start connecting with sacred sexuality, as they start this healing journey?
Mm. Yeah, I think. Oh, what a good question. What a good question. So within in my Instagram page, there's a kind of a conflict for me, because we're talking here about somatic feminism, and on some level, like my post today was about closing the orgasm gap, right? But what I'm finding in keeping, like, the Instagram page really gender inclusive, and it being a sex positive community, which it's become, um, that there's people on there that have direct messaged me to say, "Oh my God, the way you're talking about this, I'd never thought about it in that way." So you can offer a service to women, but when you include men in that dialogue, and I'm not talking about the really traumatic or intimate conversations women want to have just with a woman. I'm talking about the more generalized conversations. You get men being educated around how to approach a female body, whether that's like, "Oh, I didn't know what the orgasm gap was, and today she talked about that, and now I know what that is." And so many men put their hands up on the page, like, "Yeah, I'm committed to closing the orgasm gap." And that's beautiful. That's really beautiful, because then we're all digesting patriarchy. You're
Yes.
not, what's not to love about that? And I guess in terms of men working one to one, I think, inevitably it comes down to the principle of that if you have an unowned part of yourself, and we can talk about shadow work, but if you have an unowned part of yourself that you haven't brought into your own awareness, then it dominates. So you start to bring those pieces online, and you start to digest them. And whether that's somewhere in me I feel inferior, and therefore I tend to dominate my environment. And then you bring in the vulnerability of feeling inferior, and you love your inferiority if you are, say, a male. And then what you discover is there's just some gentleness to be had, and then because gentleness is included, you're not trying to prove that you're dominant and you're not inferior. Then suddenly you have power and you have gentleness. Oh, how beautiful!
Mm.
For example.
Which is the whole human experience, right? That's something that I always speak about. Like, we need to embrace the fact that we're complex beings and we have the capacity to have the intellectual intelligence and emotional intelligence. It's not like, oh, men are and emotionally retarded, and women are intellectually not in the same space that men, which is like what patriarchy has been teaching us. Like the mental realm is the realm of men, and the emotional realm is the realm of women. And the truth is that we wouldn't be complete human beings walking this earth if we live like that. We are whole human beings, and we have this complexity and this capacity to experience all of the range of our beings, of our traits, and to experience them fully.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and so if we also go back to sort of like the myths that we've been sold, if I'm walking around just waiting for a prince to save me the whole time, I can't hold space for the masculine heart. That gives him no space at all. If I can get in ownership of rescuing myself, then I can also really bear witness to, like, who are you? What are you? How big are you? It's not all in relation to me being rescued. So actually the masculine has a lot more space to be what it is that the masculine might be if we start to untangle ourselves from patriarchy.
So it liberates us both, and everybody, because it's not just men and women, but it allows us to express our complexity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which
Uh,
is an ecstatic dance.
exactly. I love that. It's literally, I feel like this connection between that sexuality is just natural. It cannot be, and I don't understand how at any point it can be seen different, because
Yeah.
it's just that life force flowing through us in one and in the other.
Mm. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And why is there such fear of that life force? Why are people scared of the wild dancing, or the really deep surrender into to long sexual ecstasy? It's because it's the the thing that's underneath everything, you know and so these oppressed areas are really juicy to work with,
Yeah.
because on some level it's untidy and messy and wild and feral. And there's a
Yes.
grace to that I love to touch. So
But,
yeah, the dance and the sexuality for me is a continuum that can't be separated, for sure.
and it leads us to leadership. And I think that is maybe one of the theories that I have of why there has been so much fear about female sexuality, and so much fear about us tapping into that power, and that power being constantly taken away, like used by others, not by us. It's because when we awaken to our sexuality, we awaken to our true capacity to live in our lives,
Mm.
and to be leaders in our spaces. So I'm curious about how you perceive this connection of female sexual ecology and leadership.
Yeah, great. um like, I guess I'll start with personal, then I'll go from micro to macro. Okay, so like personally, I've always had quite a good time. So when I started to discover the amount of trauma that so many women, it's too common, the trauma that women carry around it with their sexuality, whether that's an experience they've had or the fact that we exist in a world that is threatening if we get our sexuality out. It's hard to explain that to a male, but you grow up fearing being on your own as a lone female from quite a young age, and that's because of the sexual threat. And I'm deeply unhappy about lots of the statistics all around the planet around that. Um, so so that really bothered me, because then women shut down on their sexuality because there's a big message that it's not safe. And then, I just want women to feel, I want everybody to feel good, right? Naive as it may seem. And, you know, you have women that aren't orgasming, makes me really sad as well, but you've got to connect the two, because once you start to have a really healthy sexual relationship with yourself, you have a lot of life force flowing through you. You have a lot of life force flowing through you. You have a lot of inspiration flowing through you. That inspiration spills into all areas of your life. So it really is good for everybody. And you automatically step into your leadership. So there's a deep ecology to female sexuality for me, because the planet needs a level of leadership that I think lots of people embody, but right now I think female leadership, it would really rebalance things. And as well as men in the type of senior masculinity I've been talking about. But also, we live in a very consumerist culture, particularly say where I live. And our sexuality doesn't take anything from nature. It doesn't destroy the environment, right? So also, the amount of consumerism and materialism and capitalism, and I'm not saying I don't enjoy buying things, because I'm no angel, I do, but the fact that my sexuality brings me such a lot of pleasure means I'm less likely to cause damage to my natural environment. My ecological footprint goes down, my leadership goes up. I mean, that's a good thing. So there's a depth to this level of leadership that is so impactful on a macro level. If you start to think, what if we were going to, plug women, plug men into sexuality, the sacred sexuality, all over the planet? What would happen? I'd like to experiment with that.
I love that. That could be fun.
And that's what we're doing. You,
Yeah,
me, lots of us.
totally. Totally.
Yeah.
How how I see that is that our sexual energy allows us to feel the capacity to desire, and to desire life, to desire more, to desire and to expand, and for me that has been a journey. I was in a moment of my life when I lost that capacity, when I lost my capacity to desire. I have shared in different times that at some point I had given up. I was just like, okay, I guess this is it. I had an orgasm once with a former partner, and I guess this is it. And everything in my life was that great, totally great. I remember going to this class and somebody saying, okay, make a list of your desires. I have no desire. I just didn't have any desire, because that is as defeated as I felt. And of course, I had given up in my life. I didn't have a sense of guiding myself through anywhere. I just didn't feel that power anymore. And it was the reconnection to my pleasure what allowed me to go back to my capacity to desire, to go towards my goals, to go towards those desires, to make my dreams come true, to dream. And so I feel like that made me a leader. Now I see myself as a leader in my household, in my own life, and in the lives of people that I have touched, and I keep touching, and I feel like that is all due to embracing this energy, that is life force that I had been so disconnected to. And when I recovered that, it just drew me back into a power I didn't know I could have access to. So I really feel like that is such a powerful connection.
I love what you just said, and yeah, connecting you into a power you didn't realize you have access to. Exactly, exactly. Yeah, and do you want to say a little bit more about how it impacted your voice? Because I think this is such a key piece.
Yeah, it was, and I feel like that's something we particularly learned from Leila. I specifically in my time with her, I learned it from her. I realized that sexuality and our capacity to express, first, of course, our pleasure, moaning, breathing, groaning, whatever came through. But then it showed up as our voice, as the things I wanted to say, as the things I wanted to share and to expand. And they have the very same origin. It's this life force. I then learned from Audre Lorde about how there is this power, this knowing that is deep inside ourselves, and that is our erotic force. So it's the erotic force wanting to manifest, to show up, and to speak up, and to heal herself and others.
Mm, yeah, yeah. So good, so good.
It's such powerful work, the one we are doing. I really love that we have this experience in this time and age that we can actually teach others how to access this power.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's really beautiful. Really, really beautiful. Mm.
And
I believe
speaking,
in us.
yeah, sorry,
I believe in us.
yes, me too. And speaking of that, I'm curious, how can people work with you? What are you teaching right now? Do you have one-on-one coaching spots available? How can they access?
Yeah, I have one-on-one coaching spots available. What I tend to do is design programs for the individual once they've approached me. So that could be like 6 weeks, 12 weeks, or ongoing. Um, that's really exciting. I work with a high level of attunement with the people that I'm working with, and I have a long background of working in, many fields that impact positively the one-to-one coaching. So it's quite a busy practice I have, but that's how people can work with me. And then I will be running some courses, but it's hard to have time for everything. But one of the pieces I want to do is really start a space where people can drop in and dance, and then at the end we'll be doing simple rituals with our own bodies. So that would be off camera in your own space for both those things. But I would love to bring in more music and dance for people because it's like we have said, it's such a seamless thing.
Yes.
So yeah, people can email me, find me on Instagram, or go to the website. It's all there. Yeah.
Beautiful. I will be sharing the link to your Instagram in the bio of this conversation. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's such a pleasure. Time just flew by. I'm like, oh
Oh
my
my gosh. Yeah.
god.
Excellent. I could talk to you all night. I thank you so much for having me here. And, I loved your page. I loved what you're about. I loved your languaging. It's really exciting to connect with you and your body of work. So unique and a part of this big movement that's happening. So exciting.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
so
much.
much. So I can just say the same. Thank you so much for connecting, for giving me this time, this space. And I also love your work. Oh my God, Feral Grace. It's so brilliant. I love that. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Okay, Sasha.
See you soon.
See you soon. Take care. Bye bye.